Well, Jim, let's power on here with the drive-thru. Our next question, sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com, is from Sarabian Ross.
Wait, what? What?
I believe that
the
would be
Arabian Nights. What did you just say?
Sarabian Ross.
Sarabian. Can you put that in the form of a sentence or spell it?
Sarabian.
Well, it's obviously Sarabian.
Well, this is Sarabian Ross's question. What a cool name. My question is about Mildred Burke.
But wait a minute. Is his first name Ross and he is a Sarabian? Means a person who cerabs? Or conducts cerabosity?
No, I think his name is Sarabian Ross. I don't think
so. First name Sarabian, last name Ross.
There's no comma separating the two, so that wouldn't. There's nothing that would indicate that this is.
Well, no, it's like if you know Plumber Moxley, Sarabian Ross.
But what's a Sarabian?
He's a person who engages in Sarabing.
What's that?
He's a Sarabian. A custodian is in charge of the custody of things. So why shouldn't a Sarabian be in charge of the Sarabia of things?
What is a Sarabia?
Well, Brian, I'm not here to be a goddamn English professor. If you don't know all these things,
where's your Webster's Dictionary over there, whatever you have?
Well, hold on. Let's see how close we can get since you just brought it up. Maybe be able to save this bit somehow and give it a fucking happy ending.
Oh, I doubt that.
Shoulder blade, shallot,
seriously doubt that.
Sensitive. Now, you say S-A.
S-A-R-A. S-A-R-A-B.
Scrappy is here. Scroll, S-A-R. Sacrament.
We're getting close.
Sagittarius. Salvage. San Jose. Do you know the way over there to San Jose? Sapien. Sapphire. She was a nice lady. Let's see here. Sardonic. I've gone too far. Saran, Sarajevo, is the capital of Bosnia-Herzegovina. Well, you do and you'll clean it up. Saracen, sapsucker. Here's one.
That's not there.
Well, you sapsucker. It sure is. A small American woodpecker that drills holes in trees to feed on sap and insects. I have a number of sapsuckers around here on the grounds. So, Seraphim, what are we looking for?
Once again, S-A-R-A-B-I-A-N.
Well, apparently he's a fake. There's no such thing.
I think this is a real name.
Go ahead.
Let's finally get to his question here. He did have a question. And his question is about Mildred Burke. I've noticed you mention Mildred Burke sometimes while you talk about women's wrestling, saying, quote, well, she's not the second coming of Mildred Burke. Can you please share your thoughts on Corny's Drive-Thru about what makes Mildred so special? Thank you, Mr. Cornette. I love your podcast.
Well, thank you, Seraphim.
Sarabian.
Well, and his knights. I guess I could say Cora Livingston, but that would be a little, obscure for the modern day audience. Mildred Burke has had a resurgence in popularity thanks to the NWA naming a tournament after her and et cetera, et cetera. No, it's a brand name. It's like Kleenex, right? Or if Babe Ruth is a baseball player, it's Babe Ruth. She was the first widely known, mainstream, attention-getting, headline-making, money-drawing, money-making women's world champion in wrestling. And she was also, by whatever everybody's account is, legitimate in that she could take most, if not all, of the girls that she worked with and did on a regular basis beat men in shoots, right? As long as there was a somewhat of a size parameter going on. So it's just, the second coming of Mildred Burke is like, as a baseball player, is the second coming of Mickey Mantle or fucking Babe Ruth or whatever the case. I don't know that Mildred Burke was the worker that, some ladies have have become in the modern era, since work has been polished since the 30s, 40s, and 50s, but has there been, until the modern era of the last 20 or 25 years where everything's blown up and become worldwide and global, has there been a more important or more mainstream name in women's wrestling, Brian, than Mildred Burke was in her time between the late 30s and the mid 50s?
Domestically, no. Obviously, Japan's a whole different story because culturally it became a whole different thing there for several years.
Well, we ain't doing this podcast in Sapporo either, so, you know, that's why I make these references.
It's either her or Moolah, and Moolah, it's more about longevity and name than it is any classic matches or any good behavior, maybe.
Well, yeah, cases. Well, no, but and let's not jump on poor Moolah. She was always nice to me. Just a distinguished Southern accent. But no, Moolah for the modern audience, because as we just saw with the WrestleMania biography, she lasted through all the reasons she lasted to the mid 80s, and to hand off the, you know, women's wrestling title to someone else after Vince bought it from her. But the time period that she was on top, that 30 years, was in no way was women's wrestling as high profile as it was during the Mildred Burke days, nor was Moolah as high profile as Mildred Burke was. And part of it was because of the fact that from the 30s to the 50s, if you were a big main event wrestling star as a champion, the world champion, either male or female, you were a national star in effect because the newspapers carried everything. There was no television. There was radio, and they did the same thing the newspapers did. They carried everything. And she drew money. She was placed in main event positions and earned it. Whereas by the time Moolah came around, she was supplying not only herself, but other female talent to the territories. And even the world women's champion was no longer, you know, a mainstream news story. And she didn't make headlines in papers. Women's wrestling was used as an attraction on the card in the territories on an intermittent basis. And Moolah was the champion because she was the boss. So, I mean, Moolah has plenty of, you know, positives to the fact that she was able to run that business and stay on top for so long and blah, 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 and negatives as far as how she did it and or her work and or keeping more athletic women from stealing the spotlight. But still, at that point in time, women's wrestling was not going to be as big as it was in the 30s through the 50s. Men's wrestling through a lot of that time was not as big as it was, especially in the early 50s with network television. So still, more people knew who Mildred Burke was during the time in the United States, during the time that she was active, than I would think since then anybody has been able to say the name of a women's wrestler until, as I mentioned, the last 20 years with network TV and the internet. So that's what it is. Just like, honest to God, and I know people go, wow, bullshit. In his day, Jim Londos was as well known a name in the United States of America as any football player or baseball player active today is known, because he was in all the newspapers in every city in the country every time he had a big match. And so I'm just talking name recognition.
What about Strangler Lewis?
Strangler Lewis the same way. During the time that he was on top, if you asked anybody in the United States, name a professional wrestler, Strangler Lewis would have been probably the first name out of their mouth, and most people would have, in the United States, wrestling fan or not, would have been able to name him. Just like I've never been to the moon, but I know that Neil Armstrong has. And I know that name because of that. So that's the point I'm making, is that now there's you know, worldwide television and the internet and YouTube, and you can see all these people and blah, blah, blah. but fewer people overall in this country know the name of current wrestlers than in those days when they were national figures and everybody at least knew their name. They may have probably had never seen them in person, and probably had never seen anything but a photograph because of the time period, maybe a newsreel in the movie theaters, but they knew who the fuck they were. And nobody can compete with that in wrestling today.